Hello, welcome to another video of Zoid's YouTube channel. This video is on techno music, a genre of music that I feel like when I got into electronic music in the 90s when I was 16, it was the first really good electronic music that I started listening to. So I don't know if this is going to annoy some people, but I mean, that's just my impression and just my opinion of the music. How it came about for me was the first electronic music I ever listened to. I was about 14 or 15. I found a cassette somewhere. It was like Goa Trance, and it was really kind of basic and cheesy Goa Trance. I'm sure there's good Goa Trance because there's good examples in every single genre, I've come to believe. But the tape that I had was the type of Goa Trance that had breakdowns that went like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boing, spring sample, and then like all these just like very cheesy soul wave arpeggios, and at first I absolutely loved it. I was like, woo, it's so funny, it's so great. Used to play it in the car all the time. My dad would give me a lift, and he'd be like, is this music supposed to be funny? I'd be like, no, it's just brilliant, it's great. And so I was listening to that tape a lot with my friend Donal. We thought it was great. And before that, I've just been kind of listening to mainstream rock and Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that. So this Goa Trance was like a window into a new world, really. And then around that time, a few months after that tape, was when I think I was 15, it was around 1994, 95, I started to hang out with my next door neighbour growing up, Derek Brady, who I'd known since I was like 2 years old when I moved to that house. He was like 3, and we like played together as little kids. Then we got to school, we hadn't like hung out with each other, so I didn't know him really when I was 15. He was just like Derek who lived next door. But one day, me and a couple of friends were like kind of bored one Friday night. We were like, let's call around. We like see what Derek's up to. And Derek was there with a couple of his friends, which was Alan Dobbin, who I also knew and went to school with, and a couple other people. And anyway, to cut it down, Derek had a great techno record collection, and Alan Dobbin also did, and he was like a very, very good DJ, Alan Dobbin. Derek DJ'd a little bit, but not so much. He was more just into buying records and listening to them. But the two of them, Derek and Alan, they both introduced me and my friends to techno music, and they knew what techno was. Derek had the benefit of his older brother having a lot of great records, and Derek kind of just inherited them. And Alan had just kind of figured it out by himself. Alan was like very ahead of his time. I don't know how he did it. He was 12 years old. He started buying records like Aphex Twin and Orb and Orbital, stuff like that. And then gradually over the next few years, he just bought loads of records and figured out what was good and what wasn't good, and just spent all his time making mixtapes. He had like a few thousand records at that point when I met him when I was 15 and he was 14, and he would spend like weeks and weeks working on a mixtape, a 60 or 90 minute mix, where he would like just arrange the perfect techno journey on this tape, where it would start like pretty deep and just get harder with every track, and the mixes were so seamless you couldn't tell where one track ended and the next track started, and just things would overlap, and it was just super smooth. And I'm so kind of, it's such a shame none of those tapes exist to my knowledge. They're all gone, Dobbin's mixtapes. But when we started hearing those techno mixtapes, and it was like tracks like by Luke Slater and, you know, US techno, but also German stuff, and like Adam X, Sonic Groove, and like Alter Ego, Acid Jesus, stuff that was just really good techno in the 90s. And having not heard it before, and then hearing this music at first, I remember me and my friends at first, some of them were like, this is boring. They thought it was boring. Of course, when you're unfamiliar with something, you don't really hear the details in it, so it sounds boring. So at first, yeah, there was a little bit of resistance to this new music, techno music, but it didn't take long. I remember listening to the tape a few times and just realizing the depth of it and the swing to it, the groove to it, the sound to it. And I was like, oh, this is so much better than that Go-A-Trance tape. I kind of became a techno convert pretty quickly and realized that techno was just a very... It was hard to define. This is what I want to talk about in this video. Techno was hard to define, and it wasn't that early, mid-90s, but like earlier on, techno was so new as a concept. There wasn't even very many records of it compared to what there is now. So like, say early on with the first techno releases coming out of Detroit techno was what kicked it off with the Belleville 3. You know, before that, okay, there was Kraftwerk, but people didn't call it techno, although it has some overlap to it. But with the first techno records and the coining of that phrase, I don't know who coined the phrase techno, but the Belleville 3, Derek May, Juan Atkins, and Kevin Saunderson, they were certainly associated with the start of this genre. And then if you have a genre which is forming and it's early and people are just giving it a name, techno, but everybody involved in the scene at that time could hear that and then do something that was kind of unlimited what you could do with that. You know, it was so undefined still. You just put a 4/4 kick drum, 909 bass drum, and like you could do almost anything over it. And I want to play some examples, musical examples of what I'm talking about. So the first example would be a track that I only heard recently, but it really made me go, yeah, 1994, wow. This was like, you know, it sums up my belief that the techno is music of contrast. And if you have a really simple groove, just grooving away, you can put almost anything you like over it. Weirder the better. So this track, Spock's Brain by Daniel Bell, DBX. Here's a few bars of it. Okay, so that track is a simple it's a kick drum and a subby bass line and, you know, kind of a snare, crunchy snare and hi-hats and ride cymbal. Very simple pattern. I won't say basic, it's a groove. It's a killer groove, very simple, not much going on, but the weird sine waves that come in over the top are like not even in a pattern that's repeating. It's just really out there, really sci-fi and weird. And it just creates this amazing atmosphere. And that track really, it shows how like out there you could go with techno in 1994. Daniel Bell, he had been born in California, I think, but moved to near Toronto, and then he was part of Cybersonic with Richie Houghton, which in the early 90s was putting out some killer techno. I've got a couple of Cybersonic records, really fast killer techno. And then later on DBX, and he put out a record Losing Control. And he was a producer of this minimal techno, but very interesting and very I think even fresh to this day sounding. So that was Daniel Bell. Every week it seemed in 96, 97 when I was buying records, every week there'd be something new coming out of this genre. This is like the early melting pot of the techno days. It was so vibrant and so open to things. And now we're in a different phase now. It's like 30 years later. It's not new, it's not young. And there's been so many techno records, many tens of thousands. You can't, I've noticed in the last few years, I've started noticing music from younger producers coming out. It's like techno, it's clearly techno that doesn't bring anything new to what techno was in the 90s. It was very well made. It's the idea that they're good stylists in that music. I made a video on innovators versus stylists. You either innovate and change the music for everyone, or you're a stylist and you make music in that style. It's not like one's better than the other, but one is very rare. But, you know, the point is though that these days, if you make techno, it's much more limited what you can do. Because if it's really different, then it's not techno, and it will get hoofed into some other experimental pile, or it's just something else. So kind of paradoxically, the more records that get made within a genre, the more narrow it becomes. And I think it's true for all genres. I mean, look at pop. Well, pop music is whatever is popular at the time, so maybe that does change. But the pop music of today, I mean, if you go back 20 years, it hardly changed at all. It's so narrow. And rock, I mean, what's happening in rock music? Like, I've never really been into it since I got into techno in the mid-90s. You know, before that, I was really into Jimi Hendrix and whatever rock bands, but I just lost interest in it after getting to electronic music, which I saw as better in the future. And, you know, yeah, Radiohead were cool. I remember Kid A came out and I was like, oh, interesting. A rock band is like doing stuff with techno and electronic music. And then I saw all the reviews that came out of it, and they're all like, it got panned at first, and there were all the critics thought it was shite. And I was like, they don't get it. But yeah, nowadays people rate that album highly. So Radiohead are one of the few bands to kind of do that. But yeah, I'm not interested in really much of rock or mainstream music, except for Bjork and whatever, David Bowie. He's not making anything anymore. There's very few people who keep innovating in the mainstream. But back to the genres. So what is a genre? In the book Sweet Anticipation, The Psychology of Expectation in Music, that book is like a heavy university textbook, and it talks about this genre. There's no difference between a genre and a specific example of that genre. For example, if you've never heard any Irish traditional music before, and then I play you, 20 different recordings of Irish traditional music, for you it all sounds the same. You'll be like, it all sounds the same to me. That's what people say about jazz or Irish music if they don't know it. And they're not lying. They're not making it up. It does literally sound the same to them. I mean, somebody who doesn't listen to any electronic music, any techno, duff music. It's all the same. It all sounds the same. It's all just like 4/4 bass drum. That's all they hear. Because their ear doesn't pick out details until it's familiar. Just like a language. If you hear someone speaking in a language, it all sounds the same if you can't understand the words. Yeah, you can hear just very gross differences, but like subtly you're not really able to pick out anything. So it's similar to that. So genre, what makes Irish music Irish music? You can look at it musically, you can say it's this, it's that. It's the instruments, the arrangements, the melodies, the tempos, the lack of harmony. There's no harmonies in Irish music. And you can point out all these things that they all have. And then that's Irish traditional music. And Irish traditional music is a living genre. It's not, changes every generation. Someone changes it a little bit. So like it's growing and flowing into something else. But in techno music, I mean, well, there's a big difference between Irish traditional music and techno music, well, more than one, but Irish traditional music is not necessarily a genre that's recorded. I mean, it's recorded, there are examples, but it's alive because of the live performances. You know, it's music that is supposed to be heard live and played live. And techno music is not. It's recorded music genre. You know, there's very few live sets compared with DJ sets. Maybe there's a bit more live set now, but it's debatable how live it even is when it's live. You know, it's first and foremost, it's music that comes out of a studio, using the studio as an instrument. So in that sense, it is frozen. All the classic records of techno, you know, the Underground Resistance records, the Jeff Mills, the Robert Hood records, they're the gold standard of techno, and it's hard to move beyond it now. I've wondered about the lifetime of techno because, I mean, if you look at the lifetime of jazz, it kind of was forming in the early 1900s, and then 1920s you had the, you know, Louis Armstrong Hot Fives and Hot Sevens, so it was kind of born in the 20s. In the 30s, you know, it was like the 90s of techno. Techno has kind of had its early seeds in the 80s, late 80s, and then the 90s was like so fertile. So it was like the 30s in jazz, it was like big bands everywhere, just massive amount of jazz and swing everywhere. And then the 40s, it's kind of like the early 2000s when jazz moved into bebop and techno just moved into like much more technically advanced and proficient records. There's plenty of amazing records in the early 2000s in techno. And then, well, the 50s and the 60s, there were like a golden period of jazz when there was a lot of the early guys were still around, like Louis Armstrong, but then there was just like all the great Miles stuff and the, you know, Coltrane, and nearly all of the great jazz musicians were active. All those five innovators, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Miles Davis, Charlie Parker. Well, Charlie Parker passed away in the 50s, but yeah, it's amazing. And John Coltrane. So a lot of different styles going on in the 50s and 60s. And then maybe through the 2000s, maybe that kept going. Like we did have ebbs and flows, but nearly all of the great techno DJs and producers were, and to some extent they still are, active through the 2010s and 2020s. But the music's already kind of reached a point where everyone's wondering where it's going to go. And jazz in the 60s is probably like that too. Like it started to go off, like Coltrane's later albums up till 67 when he passed away. Not many people who like jazz were listening to those anymore because they were so out there. Ascension and all that. It's just like free, very free. So, and then Ornette Coleman coming in and free jazz and all. And then the 70s was like fusion and it just rock and dispersed all over the place. And jazz was like kind of having an identity crisis. What was jazz anymore? Straight ahead was still around, but it wasn't really that popular anymore. And then the 80s was like the 80s. It wasn't great for jazz. It was still around though, and 90s and then 2000. Like, you know, jazz it's a funny art form now. It's kind of, it's not that vibrant anymore in my opinion. But techno still is, but seems like it's coming to the end of the vibrancy to me. But maybe it's not. Maybe there'll be another resurgence. I don't know. But it's interesting to plot the course of jazz and techno and see how similar they are. So, you know, there's loads of great examples of techno records that I'd love to share, but I'll just share two more examples. And one is this Derek May Rhythm is Rhythm track, Icon, which is just very special for me because of when I was getting into techno. There was like Eamon Doyle run D1 Recordings, the Irish label, and he kind of took me under his wing a bit. He played me records, he talked to me about techno, and he'd been to Detroit and met Mike Banks, and you know, he had the respect of the techno community because he was authentic. His heart was in the right places about it. It was just a very pure label that he poured his heart into. And then the Deaf Festival, Dublin Electronic Arts Festival as well. And, as a DJ, everyone looked up to Eamon in the techno scene, really. So Eamon played me this record early on, told me about Derek May, and told me how it was sad that Derek May had made these early records and then just stopped making records and just DJ'd. And I was like, why would he stop? And also it was like he never made the record on his own. So it was not that clear. Did he make it, or, he's making Rhythm is Rhythm. Carl Craig was there as a really young, like 16, 17-year-old. And other people, and it just seemed strange. But the records where Derek May was there, they sound different. So obviously he did have, input into the... So, I don't know. Derek May's a strange character. He did a lecture when I was at Red Bull Music Academy, and it was a weird vibe. He's a very opinionated course. He didn't care about offending anyone who was even there at the lecture, like Thorsten, who put Red Bull together, Red Bull Music Academy. He'd be saying things in the lecture like, I don't know if this Red Bull Music Academy will do anything good, or if you can learn anything this way, or stuff like that. It's like, come on, man, this is great. We're all here. But I had a couple of bumping into Derek May different times, and he was very funny. One time I bumped into him in La Machine de Moulin Rouge in Paris. I was playing there, supporting him. He was DJing. And the guy he didn't know much about DJing or anything, so he asked Derek May, are you going to be playing off a laptop tonight when you DJ? And Derek May's like, motherfucker, I'm no motherfucking lap J, motherfucker. And then he went off on a big rant about lap J motherfuckers. But it was kind of funny. But he was playing off CDs, I think, not vinyl at that point. But anyway, his set was great. I was like listening to it, and I was really tired, and I was like, I'm going to go. And then it would be like, after this track. And I stayed for like ages and ages, because every track was so good. Anyways, back to this track, Icon. Yeah, it's just the emotion in this track. It's just, it elevates what techno is. This is what Detroit techno does. It's not, it's dance music. You could dance to it, but it's more than that. It's emotional. It's, it has. I've listened to the track, and it's made me have tears in my eyes before. So here's Icon. Okay, this video is quite long, so I'm going to wrap it up, but I'll have to, there's so many producers, there's like Jeff Mills and Mike Banks and all UR, and too many to fit in one video, but I have to pick Robert Hood to talk about him. And there's a great Red Bull Music Academy lecture Robert Hood did, and he talks about, when he wanted to make an album, and he wanted Mike Banks and Jeff Mills to produce it for him. And they were busy and they wouldn't do it, and eventually there's like, Robert, you have to produce it yourself. You learn how to do it. So he's like, fuck that, I'll do it myself. So, and he didn't have any money, he was poor, he was like just very limited bits of equipment, and he just got these few bits of equipment in his room and just did it every day and just hammered out stuff until it was good. It was that like grit that he had. It was like just determination to make it happen, and Minimal Nation came out of it. And it transformed techno. It really did. It invented the idea of minimal techno. But I think what happened was it set the bar so high, and it's so hard to make minimal that good. His parts are so good. The way they interact with each other, the way that they create something more. You know, if you have boring rhythms in minimal music, it's just boring. But his rhythms are never boring, is the thing. So even if he only has like 4 elements, or even less, 2 elements, it's not boring. It sucks your attention and holds your attention. So the track that I picked out, it's untitled, From the Grey Area. It's a long track, like 10, 11 minutes, and one side of a record. And Sven Väth, who I'm going to see in December in Bristol, Sven Väth opened his BBC One Essential Mix, I think in 1997, with this track, and played nearly the whole thing and did a great mix out at the end of it. But I can't play that much of it, but I'll just, a couple of snippets of it. It's an incredible track. There's so much going on in it. The synth lines, the pads, the atmosphere. I mean, it's a really track from another planet. And it sums up what techno could be. It could be so much, and it, you know, could be so far away from the center of the techno world, but still be part of it. I think it's a brilliant track, and there's so many brilliant Robert Hood tracks, but that was very special for me. So these tracks, I'm just picking 3 examples of techno in this video. It's not like these are the best techno tracks. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they're great examples of this genre in its prime, and I'm interested in what your favorite tracks, your picks of techno in its prime. What are they? Leave a comment. Let's have chats. And that is the end of this video. This is kind of the chapter in my book on techno. This comes from that. And you can follow me on Substack and a bunch of other places, Instagram, whatever. So talk to you soon.